Good morning. My name is Jan de Vos. I am project manager for Live Narmena at ABO. I am pleased to address you today with a short presentation on the nature-based remediation demonstrations that we are planning for the Grote Calie. The Grote Calie is a stream in the northeast of Flanders in the province of Antwerp and one of 3 test locations within Narmena. I will start by briefly explaining the origin and extent of the contamination. After this, I'll explain which nature-based remediation solutions we plan to demonstrate and what are the expected advantages when compared to traditional approaches. The source of the contamination in and around Grote Calie is the leather tanning factory. Leather tanning processes often use chromium, which has the effect to cause polymerization of collagen strands in hide. This increases their durability. Untreated or improperly treated wastewater was directly discharged from the tanning factory into Grote Calie. The activities took place between the 1920s and the 1980s and caused a significant legacy contamination with chromium. The discharge of wastewater that was contaminated led to accumulation of chromium in the sediment of the stream. Through sediment transport processes, the contamination has spread a significant distance downstream. The map on the right-hand side gives a geographical overview of the sediment contamination. The red star indicates the location of the tanning factory, the green polygon is a vulnerable nature area, and the white dot is where the Grote Calie flows into the River A. The color scale indicates the degree of contamination. This shows that the whole stream is contaminated, with a very high concentration encountered all the way through the nature area. The concentration graph on the left-hand side shows average concentrations around 1000 mg chromium per kilogram dry matter until the end of the nature area, after which there is a significant drop in contamination, though the contamination threshold levels are exceeded through the whole stream. The contaminated sediment has also caused significant chromium contamination on the banks of the stream. Maintenance dredging and deposition of the sediment on the banks is one of the major sources of the soil contamination. Seasonal flooding is a contributory factor, especially since this coincides with higher erosion and increased sediment transport. The map on the right-hand side shows the lateral extent of the chromium contamination on the banks of the stream. Just downstream of the tanning factory, the contamination is very wide, up to 150 meters lateral distance away from the stream. In this area, the land use is mainly arable agriculture. Application of sediment in combination with intensive plowing is the main reason for this widespread contamination. The lateral width of the contamination decreases further downstream. In the nature reserve, it's down to 20 meters, and in the last stretch of the stream past the nature area, the lateral extent is a more typical 7 meters. Average concentrations fluctuate significantly, but the floating average gives a clear trend of averages between 600 to 800 milligrams chromium per kilogram dry matter up until the nature area. The maximum values in this stretch are significantly higher, up to several thousands of milligrams per kilogram that are detected. After the nature area, the concentrations decrease rather quickly to around 150 milligrams per kilogram dry matter. There are 3 main risks related to the contamination. Now that we've established the risks, it's interesting to have a look at how this would be addressed with a traditional remediation approach. A traditional remediation would consist of excavation of the sediment, plus excavation and restoration of the banks. Because of the negative consequences that can be attributed to traditional remediation techniques, we decided to investigate the merits of a nature-based remediation approach. The requirements of such a nature-based approach would be first and foremost to employ natural processes as the mechanisms on which the remediation is based. A second main requirement is that the nature-based approach needs to take the land use into account and cause no or minimal damage to vulnerable locations, such as the nature area at Grote Calie. Other requirements are improved sustainability through lower CO2 impact and lower waste production, as well as lower costs. One specific characteristic of nature-based remediation is that it should be possible to integrate the remediation with other improvements to the ecosystem services of the stream. This could mean, for example, the creation of opportunities for increasing biodiversity or achieving other ecological goals, reduction of flood risk, or improvements regarding drought resilience. We've evaluated several possible nature-based remediation approaches to be applied at Grote Calie. Two techniques were selected, one targeted at sediment and one specifically targeted at soil contamination. The nature-based remediation technique for the sediment contamination consists of the combination of a constructed wetland with a sediment trap. This will provide a barrier to sediment transport and create favorable conditions for stabilization of accumulated chromium. Erosion and runoff from the banks will enter the stream and become part of the sediment. All sediment is then gradually transported towards the nature area. This is shown in the picture on the left. The constructed wetland will be located just upstream of the nature reserve, as can be seen by the pink outline in the picture on the right. This serves to capture all the sediment arriving from upstream and hence removes the risk related to the upstream contamination in both sediments and banks. The constructed wetland will be inundated year-round, which creates favorable conditions for stabilizing chromium in its trivalent state rather than the more toxic hexavalent chromium. This measure could potentially remove the need for an active remediation in the whole upstream section of Grote Calie. Here we see a lateral cross-section of the constructed wetland and sediment trap. The blue line indicates the current lateral bottom profile of the waterway. The green line indicates the new lateral bottom profile after construction of the sediment trap and constructed wetland. Besides the effect on the contamination, the constructed wetland has significant additional benefits. It provides a valuable habitat for certain vegetation, birds, and fish. It also provides additional storage capacity during flood events. This will protect a nearby residential area that's currently prone to flooding. The second nature-based remediation measure that will be demonstrated at Grote Calie is phytostabilization of the contamination in the soil. Our partner Dirk from Bio2Clean will further elaborate on this.
Jan, thanks a lot to introduce me and the second measure of the nature-based remediation approach for the Grote Calie. Good morning, my name is Dirk Dubin. Together with Mario Clemens, we are managing partners of Bio2Clean, a spin-off from Hasselt University that stands for the remediation of soil and groundwater in a qualitative, sustainable and environmentally friendly way. In Live Narmena, we are responsible for the nature-based demonstrations with phytostabilization at the Grote Calie. In the Code of Good Practice of Phytoremediation, published in Flanders in January 2019, you can read following definition of phytoremediation. It is a remediation technology that uses plants and microorganisms to remediate contaminated soil, water or sediment via degradation, extraction, transformation or volatilization, or to stabilize the contamination. As you can see here, phytoremediation is an umbrella term for different processes. Phytotechnologies such as phytoextraction, phytostabilization, phytodegradation, and more. In classical phytoremediation, the plants themselves do all the work, but in many cases this is not sufficient and can lead to phytotoxicity for the plants, often with mortality as a result, and or to volatilization of the contamination. In this way, the pollution from the soil is displaced to the air, and of course we do not want this to happen. In those situations, we add plant-associated microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, to the soil. This does not change the existing ecosystem, but we do give the self-cleaning ability of the soil and the plants an extra stimulus. Which bacteria or fungi are added exactly, in which places and in which concentration, that is custom made every time. In live Narmena, we have to cope with two problems. First of all, the pollution of the soil with chromium, and secondly, the nutrients that can give problems in nature reserve. As you can see in this figure, phytoremediation is very applicable for nutrients. For metals, it can take many decades, but if we focus on immobilization of chromium instead of removal, this process takes less time. The remediation objective can then already be achieved within the year. So in this project, the focus is on phytostabilization, to reduce the bioavailability of metals. Not the regular phytostabilization. We aim to demonstrate here bacteria-assisted phytostabilization. In live Narmena, bacteria-assisted phytostabilization will be demonstrated on two locations, each on a surface of approximately 500 square meters. Each location will then be also divided into different zones to demonstrate this process. The first demonstration is a nature reserve in the bank zone of the Grote Calie. This demonstration is divided into three zones: the bank zone itself, a hiking trail and plank bed, and a zone with polar trees of willow. Part of the hiking trail in nature reserve will be changed into a plank bed. In this zone, we also want to investigate the influence of different materials on soil chemistry and phytostabilization. The second demonstration is situated in an agricultural area. Here we have two zones. First of all, the bank zone itself, and secondly, the agricultural land. The bank zone is already planted in January of this year with a double row of polar trees of willow. This is also to investigate the nutrient degradation. So thank you. This was a short description of the plant demonstrations of bacteria-assisted phytostabilization for Narmena at the Grote Calie.
Hello everybody, thank you for joining this presentation. I am Joost Lux from the Flemish Environmental Agency, and I will now give a presentation of the Narmena project at Winterbeek. It is one of three projects in Narmena, and it is located in the east of Flanders. In this presentation, I will briefly go over the origin of the pollution, what nature-based remediation means for this specific location, and the measures and actions taken in this project. Now for the origin of the pollution, it comes from a factory that produces non-organic fertilizer. This started early in the 20th century until recently in 2015. The main waste products are cadmium, arsenic, radium and salt. In the figure left below you can see that after a water purification plant was installed in 1985, the waste load dramatically decreased. The pollution was deposited throughout the whole river, but during high water levels, polluted sediment was eroded in upstream parts of the river and deposited in the wetland through a small canal. The connection of this canal has now been cut off and has been reconnected to the Demer, a river that flows in the south of the area and is much less polluted. This map shows a more detailed picture of the pollution. In the center of the pollution, soil samples were taken and analysis shows that most of the pollution is in the top layers, but even at a depth of 1.5 meters, the pollution exceeds the maximum level of 6 milligrams per kilo. This suggests that with conventional methods, all of this soil would have to be excavated. Narmena aims to remediate the pollution in a non-invasive, more natural way. For Winterbeek, this means basically to put the pollution underwater, to raise the groundwater level year-round above the pollution. In this anoxic condition, the pollution bonds with sulfates. This results in a significant reduction of the bioavailability and the pollution gets immobilized. This means organisms no longer take in the pollution and also the risk of spreading is gone. In this particular case, we also have ecological benefits because the groundwater level in the wetland gets more or less restored to a natural level. This schematic picture represents an intersection of the soil, with above the surface level and the gray box is the groundwater level. To the left is the current situation, where now most of the soil is dry and in the summer the groundwater level is more than 1 meter below surface level. Measures taken in Narmena will raise the groundwater level and lower the surface level so that in the future the soil will be permanently saturated with groundwater. The measures taken to achieve this are shown on the map. On the left, a series of green boxes represent fish migratable weirs. These weirs in the Winterbeek and Demer will lift up the water level in these rivers. This will help reduce drainage of the wetland. On the map, the next measure is drawn as a yellow box. Here, we will fill up the end part of the drainage canal, which is now connected to the Demer. This will further help prevent drainage of the wetland. On the bottom of the picture, we see a remeandering project on the Demer. This will further help lift up the water level. A bit more to the east, a breach will be made in the dike. During high water levels, this will allow water to flow into the wetland. Through a small canal, this water will flow towards the center of the wetland. The last measure is lowering the surface level to reach the groundwater level. That's it. Thank you for listening.
you.